Today is December 17th, 2016. We are at the Smith Robertson Museum and Cultural Center in Jackson, Mississippi. This is Robbie Luckett. Do I have your permission to record this interview?
You do.
Tell me your name.
I am Minnie White Watson.
And can you spell that for us?
That's MINNIE WHITE WATSON.
Tell me a little bit about your life, where you're from. Tell me about your parents and how you grew up.
Originally, I'm from Bolton, Mississippi. My mom moved from Bolton, I believe, when I was a freshman in college. No, I'm sorry, senior in high school. She moved to Edwards, Mississippi. But I grew up mainly in Bolton, and from there I came to Jackson. I graduated from Sumner Hill High School in Clinton, Mississippi, and from there I came to Jackson, Mississippi, attended J.P. Campbell Bonner College. From there, I left Mississippi for a little while and then came back and enrolled in Jackson State University, where I graduated.
What did your parents do?
Well, my mother was married twice. Her first husband was a farmer. She was a farmer, and my mom was a seamstress and a midwife. So my mother's first husband was killed in a farm accident, and then my mother married a second time and was married to my father, who was he was a farmer as well. And then he went into service. He went into World War II, and he did not return home.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
There were 6 of us in all. I have one brother living now and 2 sisters.
After you graduated from Jackson State, what did you do?
I worked at Jackson State for about 5 years. Then I worked for a program called Opportunities Industrialization Center, and from there I worked with another company, and from that I went to Tougaloo College, where I'm presently employed.
And what do you do at Tougaloo today?
I'm the archivist there, and I'm curator for the Meg Evans Historic House.
You mentioned that your mother was a midwife.
Right.
What was her name?
Mary White Watson.
And how did she become a midwife?
I really don't know. When I remember my mom, but not remember, I know she became a midwife from, I guess you call it, following other midwives and going into training as far as with other midwives who was teaching her, I suppose. But when I began to pay attention, I knew my mom was a midwife.
What do you think led her to do that?
I don't know. My mom was always a person who would help others, and she started talking. She was talk to us sometime about things that she would do for others. As I said, she was a seamstress. My mom would sew for people who couldn't afford to pay her, do alterations and that kind of thing. And she just was always seemed to be a caring person.
And who were some of the other midwives that you remember? Who trained her?
I believe she was trained by a lady named Sadie Singleton, I believe. But there was several midwives around. Mrs. Annie Louise Fortner, who lived in the area. I lived on a farm, some say plantation. It really wasn't a plantation. But Mrs. Annie Fortner, who taught school as well, who really didn't have time to deliver babies. And then there was another lady, Mrs. Indiana McGraw, Mrs. Sadie Singleton. These are just some of the people that I knew of that were midwives.
And when your mother would be called, I guess, how did people get in touch with her, and what was the process for her to go deliver a baby?
Before we had a phone, when we were in the country, people would come and riding horses, riding mules and wagons. And I can remember when I started really paying attention, I got old enough to, pay attention to what she was doing. We had a horse called Red. And my mom would tell my brother if someone, because it seemed like babies are always born at night and always in stormy weather. And my mom would wake up my brother and tell him to go and saddle Red, or let's see if someone came, riding a horse or a mule, and she would ride the horse. My mom rode side saddle, as we call it, and she had her bag. She would hook it on the side of the saddle, and away she would go. Sometimes people would come in wagons, as I said, or later on in cars. she even after people would even after that moved from out there and came to Jackson, and she would even come to Jackson and deliver babies.
Wow. What, about when would this be? What?
My mom, I have it over here in my purse. Can I stop?
Sure.
Because I wrote it down the exact year. Yeah. She became a midwife shortly after 1948, and she retired on February 19, 1976.
So almost 30 years. When people came to the house, was there a room in the house that they would go into?
No,
or?
she never delivered a baby at our house.
Okay.
She always would go to their houses, and sometimes my mom would, a couple of days she would spend with people, and after we got a car, my brother was old enough to drive and stuff. Sometimes we would go and take her food and, that kind of thing.
So when people came to the house, they came to pick her up and take her.
Pick her up and take her wherever the person was that was having the baby.
And you mentioned she had a bag that she carried with her. What all was in the bag?
All of the little essentials that were needed. Her little booklet that tells you how to what to do if you ran into problems, those kinds of things. And I would just say that the family donated all of that to Archives and History.
Wow. And that booklet, was that a booklet that she wrote herself, that someone gave to her?
No, someone gave her.
Wow. So another midwife that...
Well, you also, midwives then also had to come to Jackson to the clinic and for meetings and that, that kind of thing. And so I assume that's where, when she took her, you had to be licensed. So I'm assuming that after she became licensed, that they provided her with all of that, with the little kit that you would have to have and all, the little booklets that you would record the baby's names in and the information on the parents and that kind of thing.
And so she would have been licensed by the state of Mississippi?
The state of Mississippi.
In 1948? Do you know anything about that process and what you had to go through?
I really don't. I guess we should have done some research on it. I just had a newspaper clipping of when she retired.
Sure. Do you remember any stories that she may have told about any of her experiences?
Well, some things she would come home and talk about the different experiences, and the midwives out there, as I said, they had a relationship with doctors that if they ran into a problem with maybe a hard delivery or whatever, that they could call on the doctors, and the doctor would come out. And I remember one doctor in particular, Dr. Reynolds from Clinton, Mississippi. That's who my mom would always call on.
Was Dr. Reynolds a white man?
He was.
And so he would come out in the middle of the night too?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or you got the patient to he would tell you to get the patient. He had a clinic, get the patient to the clinic or to the hospital, that kind of thing. But I don't remember my mom, she would tell us that if someone was having problem with labor, they went to the hospital or that kind of thing. But there were no black doctors out there in that country.
Right. And how was she paid for doing this?
That's what we laugh about. I think when I remember, my mom was getting, I think it was like, well, as I said, when I remember, I don't know what she was getting at first, but when I recall, she was getting $15 per delivery. A lot of times, it was not, she was not paid. They would tell her, Mary, I'm going to pay you, I'm going to do this, and my mom would say, okay. And sometimes my mom would come home with potatoes, people give her potatoes or say a chicken, and we would say, oh, we have a lot of that, we have plenty of that kind of thing. That's what as kids, that's what we would say. But my mom was very, very, very good at, I'll say she was good at what she did, but my mom was a very kind person. I remember when she was at her funeral, there were some people that came up to us and just started telling us about what all our mom had done for them. I know that, I said my mom was a seamstress, and sometimes my mom would come home home, which, and she would say, well, this person didn't have that or that kind of thing, and she would take it from her house. And they had to do all of the, like, you don't know, but when you go to the hospital, when they're having the baby, all of the padding and that kind of thing. My mom would take newspapers, and that's what they made their pads. And as by her being a seamstress, she would cover those with the with fabric, and that was that's what the patient lay on to have the baby.
Wow. Anything else you remember about things she would take with her, or did she have a uniform that she'd wear?
Oh yeah, they had the uniform. Always white uniform, and with the cap, the band that went around, and the little thing that came over. It reminded you of military nurses, really. But yeah, they had a uniform, all that, white shoes and white uniform,
So you knew who the midwife was.
You knew who the midwife was. That's what they would wear when they go to deliver the baby. But as I said, you didn't have very many, those 4 midwives that I knew out in that area. But as I was saying, at my mom's funeral, people was telling us what all she had done for them, and I still owe Miss Mary, And I remember she delivered one man's his last child, and he told her, Mary, I'm gonna name this child after you, after your daughter. My mom said, what daughter? He said, Minnie Ruth, because that's my name. And my mom said, I guess that was my pay, because I never got paid for it. But yeah, and my mom had delivered over, we counted over 500 and some babies.
Wow.
And I remember when my mom got sick, she had leukemia, and she was in the hospital. And this doctor in Clinton, who his son had taken over for Dr. Reynolds, but anyway, he was her doctor in the hospital. He told us, he said, you all need to sit down with your mom and record stuff while she's here in the hospital, because she would go in and get treatment and go home, that kind of thing. He said, but just he knew about her, and then just him talking to us about it, and we never did sit down and do that with her like he suggested. But he talked with her a lot, and about the baby she had delivered, and about problems she ran into with the different patients and that kind of thing.
When did she die?
My mom died in, when did my mom die? In 90 something. I can't really remember exactly when she died. I know I was working at Jackson State when she died.
How old was she?
My mom was 81.
And with you and your siblings, were you delivered by midwives?
Yes, we all were.
Who were they?
A lady named Mrs. Jenny Carr delivered me, and I think she probably delivered most of my mom's kids except for the baby. She was delivered by a lady named Mrs. Indiana McGraw, because she was a midwife as well.
And I assume they all knew each other quite well.
Oh, they did, because they would have to attend the meetings. They would come to Jackson there at the clinic on Woodrow Wilson. This is where they would come to their monthly meetings or quarterly meetings, however they.
And so she would send out for them, and they would come to your house and deliver the babies there. Is that right?
She would send for who?
The other midwives.
No, she would send for one.
She would
As
send.
I said.
No, they are right.
Oh yeah, just one would come and deliver the
Right.
baby.
What do you remember about them?
The other midwives, Mrs. Fortner was a teacher there, a school teacher, and she also ran she and her husband also ran the, as we call it, the country store, as well as the club. The country store on one side and the club on the other side. And Mrs. Indiana McGraw, we all were, belonged to the same church. We've been kind of like in the same community, except for Mrs. Sadie Singleton. She was in another community, the Orange Hill community.
And your father was a World War II veteran,
Right.
Who never came home.
Never came.
What happened to him? Do you know?
He was wounded, and he died in the hospital.
Do you know where he was wounded?
He was in the Pacifics.
So that would have been before your mother started midwifing.
Yes.
Did she start midwifing? I'm imagining this incredible woman who had to raise this family on her own.
Right. As I said, she farmed. We farmed, and as I tell everybody, some people say you sharecrop. No, we farmed. My mom, we rented everything that we needed, and then she was a seamstress, so that helped a lot. And then she got a little stipend, if that's what you call it, from my, from my father, from our father.
From the pension.
Mm-hmm.
And so midwifing was another way for her to contribute to the family.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
And to the community, because
And to the community as well. And then, as I said, she sold for people from all around. People would come from, and we amazed that my mom. We stopped my mom really after most of us got grown. We said, look, you're sewing for people, and you're not charging enough. And then my mom sewed without patterns. People would bring her copies out of catalogs and said, Mary, I want this made. And all she could see was the front, but she could do it. And so finally we kind of got on her about that. And
where did she learn to do that?
As a kid, my mom was a member of, came from a family, I believe it was 13 of them. And she just always she said she just always hung around her mother and did. Now her mother quilted. She didn't sew for people, but they quilted and that kind of stuff. And my mom just kind of picked it up on her own.
What other stories do we need that you know, or what haven't you told us about your experiences with your mom and other midwives?
Well, as far as other midwives, as I said, I wasn't around them too much unless they came to my mom's house with my mom to sew for them, or that kind of thing. But I'm pretty sure everybody think their mom was an incredible woman, person. But we marvel at some of the things she did, and we wonder how did she do all of these things, raising kids and being a seamstress, being a midwife, and going here and doing this and that for other people. But we think she was just a wonderful person. And as I said, so many people, when she passed, came to us and was telling us about stuff that my mom had done for them, and we had no idea. I remember when your mom delivered my twins, and she did this, and she went and bought this for them, and I didn't have curtains in my home. Your mother went and took her curtains and brought to our house, that kind of stuff.
Sounds like an amazing woman.
She was. I'm sure everybody most people think their mom or their parents were amazing, but she was an amazing woman. She really was.
Thank you so much. This was great.
You're welcome. You're welcome.